Good afternoon. I'm so happy to see everybody on this beautiful spring morning. My name is Gail Carr-Williams, and I'm from Vanderbilt University, and I want to welcome you to our Food for Thought, a lunchtime program today. We are so excited about today's program and so excited about our partnership with the National Museum of African American Music today. And I also want to say I'm happy that we're partnering with our other partner in our programs, TPAC. So what a great opportunity for all of us to be here to bring this program to you today. Kristen is standing right over there, and many of you who come to our TPAC lunchboxes know Kristen, so Kristen, thank you very much. And before I introduce Henry Hicks to you, I wanted to also give a big thanks to Professor Lou Outlaw, and I know he's out here somewhere. Lou Outlaw is a professor of philosophy at Vanderbilt University and also a board member on the museum board. So without Lou's help and without Lou's guidance to bring us here today, probably this program wouldn't be possible. So Professor Outlaw, Lou, thank you so very much, and thank you for all you do to make this museum be a part of the fabric of our city. Well, this panel is amazing today. So I'm going to introduce to you the President and CEO of the National Museum of African American Music to give you a few things about the museum. Henry Hicks. Okay.
First, we're going to dance. You all look great out here. It's great to see you all. My name is Henry Hicks, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Do me a favor, please, and give yourselves a hand for being here. I mean, you all look great. Alicia, have we gotten a picture of this audience? Yeah. Well, come up here and do it. Come. We need to get this picture. So Alicia is going to come and take a picture of you all because y'all look so great. We're really excited that you're here. We want to thank Vanderbilt University for partnering with us, and we want to thank TPAC. This is exciting. We're excited to get started with the museum. What do you all think about the idea of building the National Museum of African American Music at 5th and Broadway? So we are at least as excited about it as you are. Tonight is the city council meeting where the ordinance will go forward on its second reading. And from all of the conversations that I've had with city council people, everyone thinks, from what I can tell, that this is a great win-win-win-win deal for Nashville on a lot of different fronts. And I am really pleased that everyone seems so excited about the museum. We think that things are going to get started probably really early next year in terms of demolition and construction, and then about 2 years after that, we would be open. We've got a curatorial team that is hard at work already on pulling the storyline together in such a way that it'll be an exciting place for you all to come and to come through and to bring your friends and family. We're trying to make sure that it's programmed in such a way that it's a place where your kids want to come and hang out after school and just kind of loiter and learn and play. And we're going to try to make it technologically interactive so that we can tell the story of the soundtrack of America right here in Music City. And so we're excited to be doing that. And as a part of that, we're going to start with this panel discussion that we're going to have today. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Dennis Dickerson. He is a professor of history at Vanderbilt University. And he has written several books, including one entitled A Brother in the Spirit of Gandhi, William Stewart Nelson and the Religious Origins of the Civil Rights Movement. And so he is more than fitting moderator for our discussion today. And so, Dr. Dickerson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks, and for your tremendous leadership in building a very important cultural, what will be a very important cultural resource for Middle Tennessee and for the nation. The Civil Rights Movement, most scholars agree, mobilized masses of blacks and their allies to dismantle the structures and systems of racial segregation and discrimination. Through multiple methodologies of Gandhian nonviolence, demonstrators used sit-ins, boycotts, picketing, and other tactics of direct action to confront practices aimed at Black dehumanization. Maintaining focus and cohesion among activists was crucial to movement successes. Hence, the deep reservoir of African American culture helped to energize and sustain them in the dangerous fight for freedom. Key to their victories was the power, inspiration, and energy of music. Our panel will explore this indispensable dimension of the civil rights movement. First, to help us frame and introduce the topic of this panel and this discussion will be Ms. Connie Florence, a well-known jazz vocalist who has traveled and performed with Columbia artists and the American Negro Playwright Theater, and who is a well-known jazz performer and scholar within our community. Ms. Florence.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. They'll be singing, they'll be singing, they'll be singing over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. And go home to my Lord and be free.
Thank you. In addition to Ms. Florence, who will appear again on our program, will be three other activists, scholars, and persons who were participants in the civil rights movement, particularly as it unfolded in Nashville, Tennessee. They are Dr. Gloria McKissick, who was an activist and participant in the Nashville movement, who became a very well-known and talented educator in the public schools, as well as in institutions of higher education in our area, including Volunteer State Community College, as well as Tennessee State. Dr. Rip Patton, who was a participant, another participant in the Nashville movement, who was jailed in Hinds County Jail and Parchman Prison in Mississippi, a freedom rider, and now a well-known lecturer, and Mr. Eric Dozier, another scholar who is well-known in our community, very adept and well-known in the jazz and gospel and African-American music genre. And in that sequence, we will ask our participants to give their respective 7-minute presentations.
That's going to be hard to do. On the way here, my husband said, whatever you say, just make sure you don't sing. It was all right back then, but not now. Anyway, I would like to first thank the National Museum of African American Music and the Tennessee Performing Arts Center of Vanderbilt for allowing us to share our reflections this morning. Both myself and Rip Patton, Dr. Patton, are members of the Nashville Veterans Civil Rights Association. And one of the things that we are very aware of is how important programs such as this are in terms of saving that legacy, that oral history, before it's lost and gone. Most of us are in our 70s and 80s, and every day the numbers are decreasing. So thank you so much for having us here today. Many of the protest songs of the civil rights movement were learned at the Highlander Folk School in Mount Eagle in the 1930s. 1932 to be exact, and that was one of the few, if only, places in the South where integrated groups of people could gather and discuss strategies and sing and create protest songs in the 1930s. Imagine that. And so many people who became national leaders in the civil rights movement, like Dr. Martin Luther King, and people who were important also in the Nashville movement, got some of their leadership training and learned those protest songs in Mount Eagle. Diane Nash, James Bevel, Bernard Lafayette, just to name a few. And of course, that was the birthplace of We Shall Overcome, which became the theme song of the civil rights movement, and we still are moved in singing that song today. Some of the people who were involved then in getting their training at Mount Eagle, and also here in Nashville with Jim Lawson, who was a divinity student at Vanderbilt, taught them nonviolence as well as protest songs. And the thing about the songs back then, many of them were spiritual songs, so people knew them because they came out of the traditional black church, or they were songs that they created or and made up as they went along. But the thing about it, you didn't necessarily have to be a singer. You just joined in. They were easy to learn, redundant, and very meaningful. So that's significant about the songs back then. I am a little different than some of the other people who were involved in the sit-in movement. I came to Nashville in the summer of 1961, and it was after a number of major events had taken place in Nashville. Greensboro and Nashville quickly picked up the sit-in movement, and of course Nashville had the first successful ending of desegregation when Diane Nash confronted the mayor on the steps of the courthouse. There was immediately a march planned, a demonstration march, and when Alexander Luby's home was bombed, he was the attorney for the demonstrators, and a silent march was conducted from North Nashville to the downtown area. So there were times when you would sing, and there were times when you didn't sing or you didn't want to sing. But the songs were very significant, and I'm glad we started off with one of those particular songs. My two favorites were This Little Light of Mine, and I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Usually when we would march, that is what we would start off singing in the morning before we approached the downtown area. Got my mind stayed on freedom, and ain't nobody gonna turn me around. Like I said, I came to Nashville in 1961 as a freshman at Tennessee Agricultural and Industrial State College, now Tennessee State University. And my background was one of integration. That's what part of what made me different. I didn't have a lot of exposure to the adversity in the South, and little exposure actually to the spiritual songs. I grew up in an Episcopal church, and we sang high English hymns. But like I said, we very, very quickly learned those songs, and they're very much a part of my life to this very day. I was an easy recruit to the movement by the Freedom Riders. The Freedom Rides had taken place that summer, and I came that fall, actually in August, and the Freedom Riders from Tennessee State had been expelled from school, and they were busy looking for people to join the movement, and I became a part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. My first time to really sing a song, which was We Shall Overcome, was at my first demonstration on Church Street at Wilson Quick, which was an eatery that had a long lunch counter. And after I was asked to leave and refused, I was dragged out of there and tossed onto the street like the others, like a sack of trash. I never will forget that. And it brings back emotions every time I think about that first experience and the others that I had as time went on. And I clearly remember holding hands, locking hands with John Lewis, now Congressman Lewis, and Frederick Leonard and other members of the Freedom Rides. I was able to participate because I lived off campus. Most of the girls in the movement then were young women who lived in the city, and I lived in the city, which enabled me to do things that campus co-eds could not do. But I clearly remember singing those songs and throwing back my head, and the songs gave us unity, and they gave us courage. You could stop thinking really about what was going on and listen to those words that just filled your heart and soul with the determination to make a difference. Although at the time I didn't know I was making a difference, I just thought of myself, I guess, as a grain of sand on the beach of humanity. But each grain is important. I've learned that in time. Some people, like I said, became leaders in the songs. We didn't chant, we would sing. Those songs told our story of our struggle. We would march. I would clearly remember marching or walking, if you will, because when I came in '61, the major demonstrations were over, and just a band of maybe about 10 of us continued to sit in at places that were holding out and had not integrated. Of course, the sit-ins turned into wade-ins and walk-ins, and just any thing that was not yet integrated, we became a target of the group. And we would sing, and usually as we approached the downtown area, we would stop singing and quickly pick up our pace. I imagine the reason for that was not to warn anyone that we were on our way. And once inside, we were usually silent. We were silent. Not unless it was an occasion demonstrating at stores or something like that, where we were not allowed to go inside, and then we would silently protest on the outside. But singing was so important. It gave you energy, it gave you determination. We bonded. I'm still very close to a lot of people that I was in the movement with back then, and it was life-changing for us. People sing those songs today like We Shall Overcome at mass meetings or community gatherings, and I'm glad they sing those songs, but I really don't hear the kind of emotional connection that we had 50 years ago. I still am quite moved by those songs. Again, they are so important to the movement, mainly in bonding people together, and especially some of the spiritual songs, because it kind of lets you know that Well, it gave you a righteous indignation that God was on your side and everything was going to be all right.
Thank you. Dr. Patton?
I want to thank Dr. McKissick for the introduction. That way I don't have to go through it and I can just get right in on it. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Freedom Rides. I took part in the Freedom Ride, and this happened in May of 1961. As a matter of fact, May 14th, 1961 was Mother's Day. And on that day, CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, the bus was burned in Anderson, the Greyhound bus, and in not Jackson, but Birmingham, the Trailway bus. The Klan and other people got on the bus, and just, if you were on that bus, you were beaten. It didn't matter if you were black or white, because they didn't know who the Freedom Riders were. They decided that they took such a beating that they decided to end the Freedom Rides in Birmingham, Alabama. John Siegenthaler, I like to say my brother, was sent to Birmingham by the Attorney General to get CORE out of Birmingham and get them back to Washington, D.C., where the Freedom Rides originally started. That was a bittersweet day here in Nashville. For us in Nashville, that was the day that we opened the theaters on Church Street. We had desegregated the theaters. And we were having a picnic, and we heard about what happened in Anderson and what happened in Birmingham. John Lewis was a part of the original Freedom Ride with CORE, but he had to get off the Freedom Rides. That's why you don't see him. If you've seen the documentary, you don't see him but one time, and that's when they're leaving Washington, D.C. He was back here in Nashville. He and Diane Nash called Jim Farmer and asked permission for the Nashville students to continue the Freedom Ride. And he, along with even John Siegenthaler, said, "You're going to get somebody killed." And Diane said, "We know that somebody's going to die." But we cannot afford to let violence overcome nonviolence. We met at First Baptist Capitol Hill at 8th Avenue and Cedar Street at that time. You now call it Charlotte. And we decided we had volunteers. The difference in CORE and the Nashville Freedom Riders is that CORE had two groups, one on Greyhound and one on Trailway. There was no group coming after them. Here in Nashville, during the sit-in demonstrations, and I'll give you an example. For example, one of the stores that is still open, and that is Walgreens at 5th at the Arcade. They had a lunch counter. And if they had 5 stools in there, we might have 20 students assigned to Walgreens. And what that meant was when the first 5 were arrested, another 5 would come and take their place. And if that 5 was arrested, we had this third group to come and take their place. So when Nashville restarted the Freedom Rides, we had volunteers, and we fell in each group. I just happened to be in the third group to leave Nashville. Our first group left Nashville, made it as far as Birmingham. Bull Connor brought them back to the state line and put them out. By this time, the second group had already left Nashville because we knew that Bull Connor had taken them out of jail. And we thought that he was bringing them back to Nashville, but he put them out in Ardmore and said, "There's a railroad track over there. There should be a train to get you back to Nashville." That is the group. The first and second group left Montgomery. Now, the first group was taken back to Birmingham by Kwame Leo Lillard. He borrowed a station wagon, and we did not have interstates. There was no 65. I always tell students here in Nashville that you can get on 8th Avenue and go all the way to Mobile, Alabama, if you're going south on Highway 31. Or if you're going north, you can go all the way to Canada through Michigan on Highway 31. Music is so important to the movement. They say that music will soothe the savage beast. And there was an example where the music did soothe some savage beasts. When the first group left Nashville going to Birmingham, one of our black students, let me go back, one of our colored students from Tennessee State was sitting next to a white exchange student on the Greyhound bus when it pulled out of Nashville. They were sitting on the very front seat across from the driver. When they got to the Birmingham city limits, the police got on the bus because they knew that the Freedom Riders were coming from Nashville. They asked those two to move. They refused, and they were taken off the bus and immediately taken to the jail. The white student was taken to the drunk tank where other whites were there, but they were drunk. And this is only 2 or 3 days after the beatings that happened in Birmingham. Jim Swerg was that white student. And they told him, say, here's a nigger lover. He's one of those freedom riders. You can do anything you want to in here. We will not come back and stop you. And so the jailer waited for a few minutes, 5 or 10 minutes. He just knew that Jim Swerg would be bloody. But when he came back to that drunk tank and he opened the door, they were singing a song. Because Jim Swerg had taught them a song. And I don't think you could ever guess what the song was. I heard this little light of mine. Jim Swerg had taught them, we shall overcome, we shall overcome, which is the theme of the movement. And I guess what they figured was they're going to overcome their drunkenness or whatever it was that they had to overcome, but they were going to overcome something. So he was not beaten. The songs of the movement also came out of the black churches. And one was, the song was, I woke up this morning, and the last word in it is Jesus. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. And there are other verses, but Jesus was always the last word in that phrase. The civil rights movement simply said, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Ain't no harm to keep your mind stayed on freedom. As I was a part of the third group, I knew about the burning of the bus in Anniston. I knew about the beatings in Birmingham. I knew about the beatings in Montgomery of my friends, Jim Swerg, John Lewis, William Barbee, Sue Herman, the white female who John Siegenthaler tried to get into a car, and she said, sir, I've been trained to take this, as whites were beating her. And of course, John Siegenthaler was hit across the head with a lead pipe and kicked under a car. But the movement kept singing. When I arrived in Montgomery, I arrived on May 23rd, 1961, at the home of Dr. Harris. And we met with Dr. King, and some wanted him to go on a ride. Others said, Dr. King, you shouldn't go on a ride. We need you in the event that we need to raise funds. So he did not go. I was in the first group to get to from Montgomery to Jackson. There were 27 between the two buses. We were in the lockup room waiting to be fingerprinted and mugshots. And if you don't mind, I'm going to stand just to give you an example of what happened. We're behind this cage, and these are bars. and I'm going to play the part of Bernard Lafayette. We started singing. And the song just simply says, it lets the authorities know that other riders are coming, because we knew that because of the people here in Nashville, the students, we knew that there would be 5 or 6 other groups coming out of Nashville, if nowhere else. Bernard started a song to let the authorities know, buses are coming, oh yes. Buses are coming, oh yes. Buses are coming, buses are coming, buses are coming, oh yes. And the jailer says, cut out all that noise. This is not a concert hall. Bernard simply turns to the group and says, what are you going to do? Put us in jail? Better get you ready. Oh, yes. Better get you ready. Oh, yes. Better get you ready. Better get you ready. Better get you ready. Oh, yes. They're coming from Nashville. Oh, yes. And all the cities that were represented in that 27, because other people had joined us in Montgomery that were from Montgomery, from New Orleans. Hank Thomas had flown back from Washington, D.C. to join us. So every city that was represented, that's how long that song, we kept singing that song. The first 27, they would move us to different parts of we would build up the city jail. And they moved us to the county jail. We filled the county jail. They moved us to Raymond, Mississippi, which is just south of Jackson. If you've ever seen the movie Cool Hand Luke, and where Cool Hand Luke stayed, that's what it looked like. But that's where the best food was, because they had they raised everything there. It was more like an Arna farm. They brought us back to Jackson and then moved us to Parchman, Mississippi, one of the worst prisons in the United States. And then I'll just give you a little example, then I'll pass the mic on. They would do things to stop us from singing. We kept the guards up all night and all day. How can you sing the songs of Zion in a strange land? But we would continue to sing. And the only thing that they could do to us was to take something away from us. And I remember one time they took our mattress. If you don't stop singing, we're going to take your mattress. They opened the doors. We threw the mattresses out. You can take our mattress. Oh, yes. You can take our mattress. Oh, yes. You can take our mattress. You can take our mattress. You can take our mattress. Oh, yes. But now, to ensure yourself that you meant what you just said, you went to a different song. And that was, ain't gonna let no mattress turn me around, turn me around, turn me around, ain't gonna let no mattress turn me around. I'm gonna keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, marching up to freedom land. And that's the way it was the whole time we were in in Parchman. They hosed us down one time. They took the mattress, they took the toothbrush, and I think the worst thing that they did, what they thought was bad, was they put some stool softener in our food one time. Turned off the water. In the day, they would turn the heat on, and at night, they would turn the air conditioning on. So I don't have to tell you what was going on in the cells. But we would get water when we had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that was usually some beans and cornbread. One of the other things that happened in Parchman was if I were a chess player and my cellmate did not play chess and I wanted to teach him chess, I would simply take the toilet paper and make a board on the floor. And I could take the grits and make the kings and queens and pawns, and because it was that kind of grit. It was just where you could mold things out of it. But again, there is and I'll say this, and I know my time is probably up. There are so many songs that we learned. Keep your eyes on the prize. I'm on my way. Hallelujah, I'm traveling. Which side are you on, boy? Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep your eyes on the prize. Buses are coming. Woke up this morning, and of course, oh freedom. Oh freedom over me. Before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my God and be free. And with that, I will close. Thank you.
Before our third panelist, Mr. Dozier, comes, we will have a medley of freedom songs by Miss Connie Florence.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, but just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh, yes, it will. There've been times when I thought I couldn't last for long, but now I know I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh, yes, it will. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let segregation turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let segregation turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We're marching for our children. We shall not be moved. Black and white together, we shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We shall not be people, get ready. There's a train a-comin'. You don't need no baggage. You just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming. Don't need no ticket. You just thank the Lord. Don't need no ticket. You just thank the Lord. Your song, Dr. Patton. I'm sure you know this song. Feel free to sing along. I don't mind. Well, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Said I'm walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind. You can turn that mic on. Stayed on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind. Stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I said ain't no harm in keeping your mind stayed on freedom. Ain't no harm in keeping your mind stayed on freedom. Ain't no harm in keeping your mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
Hey,
Ain't no harm.
ain't no harm in keeping your mind stayed on freedom.
Amen.
Well, well,
Amen.
what? I don't even know what to say after that. Ain't but one thing we did wrong. Stayed in the wilderness too long. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on. Ain't but one thing we did right. We decided to stand and fight. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on.
All right.
I am very, very honored to be up here because I have read so much about this music. I talk to my children about it. I teach it all over the world because of what it is. And I'm not going to say what it was because the music is still alive. And we have to be mindful and be cautious of eulogizing this form of music and this form of singing because, you know, what we like to do is lay things aside as if they're dead and buried. But this music is very much alive, and it lived and affected the world outside of its original context. And I call to mind when the Berlin Wall was coming down and what those young people were singing. They were singing, "We shall overcome." That's what they were singing, you know. Or when it was translated into Spanish and migrant farm workers were singing it in 1967. Or when it was translated into Hindi and became one of the most popular songs in the Hindi language. It was a very popular children's song, "We Shall Overcome," and it's quite telling that that song circled around and went back to India, seeing that a lot of Dr. King's philosophy was influenced by what a lot of those older black folk, who a lot of those other black folk refer to as the little brown man from India. And so when we talk about this music, we can't talk about it as if it's not living. You know, when I was asked to speak just a little bit about music and what's happening with civil rights and human rights today, you know, it took me back to a book that I had asked, someone had introduced to me by Howard Zinn called The New Abolitionist. And Howard Zinn wrote this book about these wonderful people up here. And I wanted to read a passage from that to you right now, just to kind of frame their work. Because he comments directly on the singing, and he says it would be easy to romanticize them, but they are too young, too vulnerable, too humanly frail to fit the stereotype of heroes. They don't match the storybook martyrs who face death with silent stoicism. The young fellows sometimes cry out when they are beaten. The girls may weep when abused in prison. Most often, however, they sing. This was true of the farmer and labor movements in this country and of all the wars, but there has never been a singing movement like this one. Perhaps it is because most of them were brought up on the gospel songs and hymns of the Negro church in the South. Perhaps also because they are young, probably most of all because they are doing something that inspires song. They have created a new gospel music out of the old, made up of the songs adapted or written in jail or on the picket line. Every battle station in the Deep South now has its freedom chorus, and the mass meetings therein with everyone standing, led by the youngsters of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, linking arms and singing "We Shall Overcome." You know, as we look back on this music as scholars, as American citizens, young and old, we have to remember that this music has a context, that it doesn't just pop up, but that it comes from somewhere. It comes from a long history of protest movement that emerged from a group of people that were constantly trying to redefine who they were in a society that did not really value who they were. They were constantly transcending that culturally prescribed identity that was given to them, you know, that said that they were worthless, that all they were good for was as a source of labor, that they had no value, that they were not fully human. And so this music, every time one of these songs were sung, I've got shoes, you've got shoes, all of God's children got shoes, and Go Down Moses or what have you, any of these spirituals, or Keep Your Hand on the Plow, which was the original lyric to that song that I did. These people were reasserting themselves. One of our scholars, a noted scholar of the civil rights music, Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan, one of the founders of Sweet Honey in the Rock, and who was also participated in one of the original freedom choruses that was actually, and you brought this to me at our meeting the last time, Cordell Reagan was from here. He was from Nashville. And what she said was that when we sing, we announce our existence. So for us, this music has never been about entertainment. You know, it's never been solely about just, you know, being encouraged or feeling good. And even though that's a part of it, because you do feel good when you sing it. Didn't y'all feel good when you were singing? You did, didn't you? It did something to you. Like you begin to change in that moment, and there's an immediacy in the music that calls you to be something different right there in the moment, not to wait on it, not to wait to feel good and then start singing, but to sing until you feel good, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about. Call and response is a part of our tradition as well, so if you feel free, you can say amen, whatever you need to say. Y'all hear me. And so, but, you know, it's something to sing and to announce your existence in a place that kind of wishes you don't exist. Even making that noise, that moan or whatever, is a statement of protest and a statement that we are here and we are here to stay. I was struck by something that Dr. McKissick said. She said, at the time, I didn't see myself as making a difference. I just saw myself as a grain of sand on the shores of humanity. You know, now we can pick up books like this, and I think one of our panelists mentioned Guy Carawan, who was one of the persons that introduced We Shall Overcome, along with Pete Seeger, to Dr. King at the school on Mount Eagle, who they actually learned from a group of women in South Carolina that were striking against the American Tobacco Company, group of African-American women that were protesting the low wages there. And they took the song back to Tennessee, and then when Dr. King heard it, he heard the haunting melody and then took it back to the movement. But keep in mind that, you know, when we have these books and we have all of these songs compiled, where you can actually you can go to, you know, Amazon right now and buy a book called Sing for Freedom, and it's a 2-volume series on the music of the civil rights, and it's and you know, but books can be deceptive because books live in a particular space and in a particular time, and either on your shelf or when you're sitting in a chair and you're reading them, and that's where they live for you. But one of the things that struck me listening this morning was the fact that these things were happening in real time. They were writing these lyrics, changing these words, adapting this music in real time, in real live service to humanity. And like Howard Zinn said, they were singing because they actually had something to sing about. Which brings me to music and the civil rights movement, or an extension of it today. And at first, when I approached that subject, and I've been approaching it quite often as of late, because I've been reading articles saying, well, where's the music? Where's the protest music of today? You know, because also alongside of this particular music of civil rights, we had Curtis Mayfield, we had Marvin Gaye, we had Aretha Franklin, we had James Brown. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. You know, you had those things. You had Sam Cooke, A Change Is Gonna Come. You had those things happening in popular music. And so I find a lot of folks are looking for that same dynamic today, but what you also had back then is you had a community and you had a context that was emerging, and the music was so intertwined with the movement of the community that you couldn't tell what was movement and what was music. It was just what it was, or what it is, as we used to say. Which caused me to begin to look at it a little differently, because now we have Twitter and we have Facebook, and you had young people in Egypt that had launched the Arab Spring, tweeting the children in Ferguson in real time, telling them how to deal with tear gas on the street as they were dealing with tear gas on the street. You have young Native American kids that have adopted hip-hop philosophies to lead a whole kind of a whole environmental movement that is structured around hip-hop music and hip-hop culture. And so I began to search, and as I began to search, I saw that as the movement began to grow, the music began to emerge. And I went to YouTube, and one of the songs that was mentioned was "Which Side Are You On?", which was a song that was actually started in Harlan, Kentucky, as part of the miners' movement. And I heard a song by Rebel Diaz, where he had sampled these singers singing this song. And he's bringing it back. And when I go talk to these young kids and I play this for them, they say, well, who's that singing that, and where does that song come from? Or I see the Wu-Tang Clan take a song like Wake Up by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, and they write a song called A Better Tomorrow with the images of Ferguson and the Black Lives Matters movement, and they're weaving this music into the way that they put their music out. And so what I say is be encouraged, because our young people are singing. They are singing. And there is an emerging movement, and there is the stuff of movement that is percolating in our society right now. And just like you all saying as young people, our young people are starting to also find their creative voice, not just their voice of protest, and they're starting to recognize these links between music and social change and music and social activism. You know, and I think about how, you know, hip-hop artists like Mos Def, and I wrote a few of them down, Ja Poet, Chuck D, De La Soul, are calling upon the traditions of the last poets and the Watts Prophets and Gil Scott-Heron. You also have a lot of these young Americana singers taking up these freedom songs once again and beginning to sing them, and they're acknowledging the influence of Pete Seeger and Bob Dylan. And so our young people are still singing. But we have to keep in mind that when these folks were singing, they were singing and serving. And they were doing inspiring things that inspired song. So my question to you is that, what can you do that inspires song in your life? How can you support your young people so that we can also continue what you all started? I'm very proud to be a part of that, and kind of, you know, my calling, I feel, is to be a bridge and reintroduce our young people to these freedom songs so that they can see and feel and announce their existence as Dr. Reagan has called us to. So, you know, in the words of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, wake up, everybody.
We're grateful and appreciative to all of our panelists. We also want to acknowledge Mr. Kevin Medill, who accompanied this Thank you very much. Our time is far spent, but we will allow 2 questions very quickly for the panel. Thank you very much. Let us all stand, and Miss Florence will lead us in singing This Little Light of Mine.
All right.
With enthusiasm.
With enthusiasm. Yes. Thank you, Ms. McKesson. If you didn't go to church this week, now's your opportunity. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine,
very much for your attendance. Please note that this is the first installment. The second part of Soundtracks of the Civil Rights Movement will occur on May the 20th. Thank you.
Yes.